Prepare to experience the strongest radio allowable by law. Secrets will be revealed. Myths dispelled. From the studio gym where excuses never apply, it's Superhuman Radio with your host, Carl Lenore.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of Superhuman Radio. We have a great show today. We're going to be adding a new angle to the discussion of whether or not bigger muscles are stronger or if size plays no role in strength at all. This has been a debate that's been going on for decades now. That's why people have questions like, should I train for strength or for size? We're going to find out here in a little bit. Later in the show, we're going to talk about a new nanotechnology that promises to upgrade both your mind and your body. And this is something that has been dreamed about for a very long time. We'll be talking about that later in the show. Of course, share the show. Share it now. Just hit the share button wherever you are. If you're on YouTube, they have a share button. If you're on one of our Facebook pages or LinkedIn, they have a share button. Just hit the share button now and let your friends know what you're watching. Before we do anything else, we have to thank our title sponsor, and that's Legendary Foods. Legendary Foods. So people are finally getting their free Legendary tasty pastries. And lo and behold, they're not just getting tasty pastries. They're getting tasty pastries, seasoned nut butters, seasoned almonds, flavored nut butters, all with zero sugar. So you can win a smorgasbord, how you like that, of Legendary food products. We're going to tell you how to do that in just a second. And it's really not a win. If you take the time to follow my directions, we will send you this package. Legendary introduced the tasty pastry. It was supposed to be an alternative, a healthy alternative to a Pop-Tart. It's so much more. It tastes so good, you won't even care that it's good for you. Less than 1 gram of sugar, 20 grams of high-quality protein, an astounding list of fantastic flavors. If you don't want to try and get some for free, you can go to shrnetwork.biz/legendary and use the code SHR10 to save 10% off your order. But if you're like me and you like free stuff, listen during the commercial break. When you hear the secret word, email that secret word to onair@superhumanradio.net along with your mailing address, and we will send you one of these boxes, courtesy of the generosity of Ron Penna, of tasty pastries and other Legendary products. You won't be disappointed, I promise you. In fact, if you don't take a second to listen for the secret word and email it to onair@superhumanradio.net along with your mailing address, you're really missing out on a really, really great opportunity. So there you go. And now, without further delay, get my guest up here, Professor Jonathan Folland. How you doing, Professor Folland?
Very well, Carl. How are you doing?
Good. And welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you all the way from the UK. The one thing I love about technology is these kinds of things where we can all sit together on different continents and have these kind of discussions.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's fantastic. Delighted to be here and talk about this topic. It's something I've been interested in for many years. And yeah, it's something that gets a lot of attention generally. So, out there in the general public, everybody has a little bit of a view on this.
My friend Billy Mitchell just said to me this morning, he goes, well, why are powerlifters so strong, but they don't have big muscles? But the reality is that a lot of powerlifters do have big muscles, but it's covered by body fat. So you really
absolutely. Yeah, they generally have really pretty big muscles compared to the average man in the street, no question.
And the reality is that I have a friend at the gym named Jonathan. He's probably 5 foot tall, and he's ripped, and he looks so much bigger than he really is. If he had even a little sub-Q fat, he wouldn't look. So the illusion that we get from bodybuilders versus powerlifters is really a phenomenon that's caused by body fat. It really is. Leaner people look bigger. They do.
Absolutely. And, trying to judge somebody's muscle size by looking at them is often very misleading. So, it's difficult. And we tend to do that. We just naturally look at someone and, and come to an opinion on how strong they are based on what we see. And that's pretty inaccurate, I think.
It's a funny, I'm only thinking about this now. And this happened to me when I was quite a bit bigger than I am right now, too. I was probably close to 270 pounds. But everybody carries muscle differently. And when I was young, I was flat. In fact, some of the people in the neighborhood called me Gumby. If you remember the claymation cartoon Gumby, because Gumby had really broad shoulders, but when he turned sideways, he disappeared.
Yeah, it was really slim front to back. Yeah.
And so I put on a lot of muscle through my period of time in the past 20 plus years of training. But it doesn't look like as much as it is from my width of my, the thickness of my chest and my back. But I had to go get a shoulder x-ray one time. And the lady had to turn the power up 4 times. And she says, and she went like that to me. She poked me. She goes, my God, you've got so much muscle. You don't look like you have that much muscle. And I said, yeah, because naturally I'm really flat. I said, so, I just look like the average person now. But yeah, people carry muscle in different ways, and it's interesting. But strength is a different thing entirely. I mean, there are people out there who have developed great neuromuscular adaptation. I just saw a little person squat 500 pounds at a body weight of 86 pounds. That's astonishing, right? But when you take into the length of his femur and his back, his torso, and leverages, it's not exactly the same thing as a 5 foot or a 6 foot person squatting that. But there are a lot of people out there who don't carry a lot of muscle but are strong. Isn't that true?
Sure. Yeah. Yes and no. I mean, yeah, they can be pretty strong. There are other things that matter. It's not just about size, but size is pretty important too, I would say. In most kind of quantitative experiments on humans, muscle size explains something like around 50% of the variability between people. It is the single biggest factor quantitatively. Okay. It's not the only factor for sure, but it's the biggest single factor. And that rises when you look at groups where there's bigger range on the data. So if you include children and adults, or if you include trained and untrained people, you tend to find the correlations or the relationships go up between size and strength. So then you're talking about closer to 80% of the variability is explained by muscle size in those cases.
Wow.
So it's a major factor, and
it can't be ignored. There's no doubt about it. It can't be ignored. So so you wrote let's say a position paper. Would it be appropriate to call it that? A position paper?
It's an opinion piece, I would say.
Opinion piece. But it was a review of the available science, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Some work that we've done and a big sweep of the data and literature that is published, all about the importance of muscle growth in resistance training for the gains in strength. And I would argue they're pretty important. But there are some important kind of nuances to bear in mind here. Certainly in the first weeks of training, you can gain strength pretty well with no change in size.
Right.
That's everyday experience from everybody who's ever been to the gym when they're out of condition. In the first few weeks of a program, you can get stronger and your muscles don't really change in size. Because there are other things that matter, and one of those, as you talked about, is the neuromuscular activation, the ability of the nervous system to activate the muscles and use the muscles and utilize their ability. And that changes quite substantially in the first few weeks of a training program and contributes to strength gains. But as you move from the first few weeks of training into a few months of training, then increasingly muscle size adaptations and muscle growth becomes more and more important to the improvement in strength. So it's almost like a time factor that influences how important muscle growth is to the strength gains.
So let's talk specifically about your paper. So you reviewed the available literature and you deduced from the available literature that muscle size is in fact the single biggest corollary, let's say, or
correlate, correlate or determinant of muscle strength, and an important factor for strength gains with resistance training. Increasingly important as the duration of the training goes on. So in those first few weeks, it's a relatively minor factor, but then it becomes increasingly important. Just to give you one example, so one of the studies we published a couple of years ago was comparing a group of untrained people and a group of long-term resistance trained people who'd been lifting heavy loads for a number of years, on average 4 years resistance training of the quadriceps. Their strength was 60% bigger. Their isometric strength was 60% bigger. And their muscle volume was also 56% bigger. So it appears to explain most of the difference in the muscle size.
And isn't it, it's unfair to look at untrained individuals. I was just thinking about, anything you look at. I don't care if it's playing hockey or driving a race car. If you put an untrained person in that situation, they're not going to be able to perform as well as a trained individual. It's almost unfair to even think of them. In fact, one of my big frustrations with the medical orthodoxy is when they create epidemiological research for, let's say, testosterone levels or anything, they look at the population as a whole. And we can all agree that today, the majority, at least 40% of the population, is sick. So taking into account their testosterone levels is really not a value at all. And I would also say that there should be another group when we do epidemiological studies, and that is lifelong athletes. Whether you are there was a paper done 15 years ago called the Fit Consumer study. And it looked at people who went to the gym at least 3 times a week, plus participated in a sport whenever possible, whether that be pickleball is all the rage today, or maybe they played soccer on the weekends, or Saturday afternoon they spent at the park playing basketball. And they looked at these people as a subset of the population. They had a lot of unique stuff about them. But I really feel like the medical orthodoxy should be saying, let's look at regular people, but let's tease out athletic people, because they would learn that athletic people, by and large, don't fit into that category at all. And it's unfair to pile them in with the newbies, just the same way it's unfair to put the newbies in their category and compare them in exercise modalities. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I have some sympathy for that point of view. Absolutely. I think certainly when you're talking about the widest general population, you're encountering all sorts of, disease states and health issues and things which are all mixed in there. But you can use comparator groups which are untrained and healthy. But I think certainly in the sports kind of literature and the sports science literature, it's much more interesting to compare, particularly if you're interested in performance, to compare elite level athletes to kind of sub-elite level athletes,
yes,
rather than the untrained people.
Yes.
That's far more interesting. And tells us so much more,
relevant.
actually.
I think it's more relevant, not just interesting.
It is.
I mean, like I said, it would be unfair to compare a guy who's never driven a Formula One car and drop him in and then assess his performance and then say, come on, he doesn't know how to drive a Formula One car. It's not fair.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I completely get that. I completely agree with that. So I think when you're trying to understand sports performance or physical ability, it's much more interesting to compare people who are really good to people who are not so good. But there are very few studies like that actually in the scientific literature.
I know, because they don't discern that there's a difference between those of us who have been training for decades and the average guy who decides to walk into a Planet Fitness and sit down on a machine and try some resistance training. They don't think there's any difference, but that's okay. So let's go back to your paper. So the number one correlate with strength was the size of the muscle.
Yeah.
But is that true in untrained individuals as well? Or did you just say that a second ago?
Yeah, it is. It's true in untrained individuals. It's true in trained individuals.
Okay.
You know, it's
that's exciting.
It's the just a kind of fundamental given. It's, you know, there is this relationship between muscle size and muscle strength. It's not, as I say, it's not the only thing influencing strength, but it is the single most important factor.
Can we tease out hyperplasia and hypertrophy? Can we say the bigger muscle fibers are stronger, or if you just had a lot of new little fibers, they're not? Can we tease those two out?
Not easily. Not easily. That's actually quite difficult to separate that out. But fundamentally, what it comes down to is the contractile proteins within the muscle. You know, the cross-bridge cycle that was identified by Andrew Huxley, you know, decades ago now, and he won a Nobel Prize for his work looking at the cross-bridge cycle, the interaction of the myosin and actin filaments that generate force and lead to ultimately movement in skeletal muscles. So, and that process is fundamental to force generation. The more of those contractile cross bridges that you have lined up across your muscle in parallel, if you like, from one side to the other, kind of across the muscle, you know, and if you have a wider muscle, there's more of them lined up in parallel, and they are basically pulling the ends of the muscle together. And it doesn't really matter that much if it's lots of small fibers or a few big ones. It's all about the whole together and how much contractile protein there is in there, and therefore how many cross bridges there are, actin and myosin cross bridges lined up across the muscle, pulling the ends of the muscle together and basically pulling the bones together ultimately and producing movement. That's the crucial thing.
What influences the production of new cross fibers?
Well, that's a really interesting question. There's been a huge amount of work done on the biochemistry of that now for the last 20 years or so. And there are a lot of signaling proteins and really complex biochemistry in those pathways. And some key players include things like insulin-like growth factors and mTOR, which stands for mammalian target of rapamycin, which is one of the key signaling molecules in muscle that helps to stimulate muscle growth. And those things are undoubtedly very important in the response to resistance training and allowing the muscle to grow.
Do those cross fibers, once they form, are they permanent? Or because so I haven't trained my legs in a couple years with any real sincerity because I've had some injuries, and I really want to start training my legs. And when I get my ArxFit machine, I'm probably going to start with that. But my legs are so much smaller than they used to be. Elisa says that I no longer have an ass. I used to squat very heavy. I mean, my squat was my best. My deadlift was second. I'm Italian, so I have pack mule blood, and I have strong posterior chain. And now I have no legs and no butt. Are those cross fibers still there, but the fluid in that the sarcoplasmic fluid in the fiber is gone, or do they disappear if you don't activate them?
Yeah. I mean, muscle is a dynamic tissue. You know, it can grow and it can waste away just as much, probably. I mean, there are some interesting things that the detraining actually of strength is a little slower than the training. I know that's really surprising. It actually stays around. You know, if you train for 3 months and then you do 3 months of nothing, at the end you're a little higher than you were at the beginning.
I would challenge age as being a factor in that, because what I like to say to people is the climb back up the hill is so much slower than the fall down the hill. When I stopped training, I within 2 to 3 weeks, I start noticing changes in muscle. I start noticing aches and pains that I didn't have before. But I think age plays a role in how fast you deteriorate. And keep in mind, I'm hormonally optimized. When I was powerlifting, I used drugs. And when I stopped, I had to get on testosterone because my testosterone levels wouldn't return. And so I take testosterone, and I'm probably more muscular than the average 63-year-old. But with that being said, I still lose strength pretty quickly.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's right. I think certain things do play into that gain and loss of muscle size and muscle strength, and age is certainly one of them. And the endocrine hormones are crucial in that as well. But in injury and other stresses, other major physical stresses and nutrition, of course, all play into the gains in size and strength with training, and how much we lose with detraining.
So when we talk about the size of muscle, we talk about these cross
bridges,
cross filaments or fibers. What about if we look at physics, and you and I talked about this off the air, right?
Yeah.
A bigger, thicker muscle fiber is like two triangles or pyramids base to base. And the further apart you get, the easier it is to move a weight. Like if you had a rope and two guys and they stood side by side and they had 1,000-pound stone that they were going to pull, they would have a hard time pulling it side by side. But if they got further apart, these angles come into play and they can move faster. So does the fuller, more plump, if you will, muscle fiber have more strength because of that geometrical physical component?
Not the muscle fiber itself, but the internal arrangement of the muscle. It's called the muscle architecture, which is the kind of internal structure of the muscle. So the internal architecture of the muscle unquestionably affects strength as well. So it isn't just about size, but some of these other factors come into play. And one of them is known as the angle of fiber pronation, so which is to do with the direction of your fibers and whether they run directly along the muscle, kind of between the tendons, or whether the fibers run an angle across the muscle. And that definitely has an influence, because what that actually allows the muscle to do is to have more contractile proteins, more contractile filaments that are able to produce force lined up within a given space. You can actually line up more of the cross bridges within a given space if they run at an angle to the direction of the muscle. And that unquestionably helps to improve force production. And it's a training adaptation too. So, if you do strength training, the angle at which your muscle fibers run through the muscle will change. It will increase towards the optimum, which is actually quite high, which is 45 degrees. And most of our muscles are nowhere near that. So there's a lot of scope for that to improve.
Yeah, it's interesting. Supercompensation is an amazing phenomenon when you look at it in the context of resistance training. So there are drugs that will make muscle fuller. We're talking exclusively fluid in the muscle. And some of those drugs actually impair strength because they impair the calcium channel activation. Some of those drugs, like trenbolone, and I'm not asking you to, talk about drugs, but trenbolone will cause a greater degree of contractile force because it amplifies calcium channel activation. Does the fluid in the muscle play any role in this discussion?
Not a huge amount within kind of normal limits. One of the nutritional things you can take, which almost certainly leads to water retention in the muscle, is creatine. It's a popular supplement in the context of strength and power and resistance training. Acutely, it doesn't really change strength though, but the muscle becomes a little bit bigger due to water retention. But strength isn't really affected in a significant way.
But muscular endurance is affected by the turnover of ATP.
Yeah. So kind of what I would describe as sprint endurance, or, so the ability to maybe go for 30 seconds to a minute or something like that, particularly in repeated sprints, actually is the best evidence. So if you run hard, say you're a soccer player or a gridiron player, and you have to sprint the length of the field, and then suddenly you got to get up and sprint back again, those kind of repeated sprints, it seems to be quite useful for that. Yeah.
But in resistance training, it's been useful it's actually been shown in numerous really well done studies to take a person maybe from a particular weight in a particular movement, and they're stuck at 5 reps, and they can get 6 and 7 reps once they are loaded with creatine. So, but that's still muscle endurance we're talking about now.
Yeah. And there is some nice evidence that creatine does amplify the response to strength training too. So, it is a useful adjunct to training.
So when we talk about hypertrophy, we talk about muscle growth. And you mentioned mTOR and IGF-1 and even mechano growth factor, IGF-1 EC, all these growth factors. A lot of them are produced in the muscle during
that's right.
training. And that's what BFR takes advantage of, right? So if you put a cuff on and you take 30 or 40% of your maximum weight that you can handle in a curl, and you do reps until the congestion is painful, that makes your muscles grow, but it doesn't necessarily make you stronger right away. Talk about that phenomenon.
Yeah, well, I think it does help to lead to some strength improvements, but they're slower, because what you're not getting there, particularly if it depends on the training status of the person, but particularly if someone is a bit lower down the curve, maybe starting in their strength program, they don't necessarily have the neural adaptations that also help to particularly accelerate strength gains at the beginning of the training program. Mm-hmm. So you get some better size adaptations, but if you don't get those neural adaptations, then it is beneficial, but not really that much more than normal kind of heavy lifting, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. And that was what was wrong with myostatin inhibition. So I actually tried to get Dr. Sejan Lee on this show a decade ago, and he wouldn't come on because his mission was to cure neuromuscular disorders. And he thought bodybuilders and strength athletes were vain and wasteful of technology. But he did communicate with me a lot. And there was a great study out of one of the State University of New York where they looked at myostatin inhibition and muscle growth. And the amount of myostatin inhibition you need is above 90% and continuously. And then you can actually see changes in muscle. Mm-hmm. And as soon as the myostatin inhibition is removed, your muscles return to normal size, because muscle is metabolically expensive. And from an evolutionary perspective, carrying a lot of muscle really wasn't a good thing, just the necessary muscle for day-to-day tasks. But we also learned that those muscles made larger by myostatin inhibition were not stronger. In fact, they had impaired strength, which is interesting, because there's an example where strength did not follow size. But it's always when you try to jury rig physiology, and biology, it seems.
Yeah. And there's other examples like that, like acromegaly is a condition of excess growth hormone.
Right. Adenoma,
and that produces bigger muscles too. But a lot of that extra muscle mass is connective tissue, which isn't that functionally useful beyond a certain normal amount.
Right.
So those muscles aren't stronger either. So right. There are other examples. It needs to be useful, physiologically functional muscle to make a contribution to strength and power.
We're going to take a quick commercial break. We got questions from the audience. I'm asking people to share the show, please, so other people can join in. We're talking with Professor Jonathan Folland. Tell which university are you with? I'm sorry, I should have said it.
Loughborough University.
I didn't want to try to pronounce.
No, that's fine. I mean, we're from the UK, and not one of the most famous cities in the UK, but in the field of sports science, we're actually one of the best places in the world, and I can give you quantitative evidence for that. So we've been ranked #1 in the world for the study of sport at university level for the last 5 years on the trot. So in the
wonderful.
QS World Rankings. You can go look it up if you're interested. Loughborough University.
We're going to take one quick commercial break. Stay with us. We've got lots more. We'll get all of your questions answered before the end of the show. I promise we shall return. I want to introduce you to Tau Patch, a heavily researched patented wearable device that provides immediate and long-lasting health benefits. Tau Patch's nanocrystals convert your body heat into light of specific therapeutic frequencies that optimize your central nervous system. The health benefits of Tau Patch include relief from chronic pain, better sleep, increased focus, reduced stress, improved athletic performance, and more. Discover what it can do for you by visiting shrnetwork.biz/Tau Patch. That's TAOPATCH. Use code SHR for your superhuman discount today. Being superhuman means being conscientious about the choices we make. White Oak Pastures is superhuman when it comes to raising livestock. They're committed to animal welfare, land regeneration, and rural revival. They responsibly manage the entire process from the pasture to your doorstep. High-quality, pasture-raised, great-tasting meat from a farm you can trust. Full nose-to-tail selections. They even have options for your pet. Go to shrnetwork.biz/White Oak and use the code SUPERHUMAN to save 10% off your entire first order. Knoll Creek Hemp Company's Delta 8 soft chews are the premier Delta 8 product on the market today. Knoll Creek's Delta 8 is produced from high-quality hemp-derived CBD oil, and soft chews are manufactured using proprietary nano-emulsification technique that ensures the Delta 8 soft chew will timely deliver the desired effects cleanly and consistently from piece to piece. In a space where at least 70% of the products fail to meet label claims and where most users of conventional hemp products are left disappointed, Knoll Creek's Delta 8 soft chews are a product you can trust. Visit shrnetwork.biz/Delta8. That's DELTA and the number 8, and use the code SHR20 to get 20% off your first order today. Hypertrophy. I would easily say that I am the hugest proponent you will ever meet to doing anything that will improve the quality of my sleep. And that's because sleep is linked to just about every metabolic disorder we see in our population today. One of the easiest things you can do to improve the quality of your sleep is to get a pillow that can be shaped into the exact form factor that allows you to get your best night's sleep. And that is MyPillow. I've been sleeping with MyPillow for a few years now, and I can tell you that when I have to travel and stay in hotels, I don't get a good night's sleep because I don't have MyPillow with me. Right now, you can save up to 60% off of everything offered to improve the quality of your sleep at shrnetwork.biz/MyPillow when you use the code SHR. Or you can call toll-free 800-889-4938. And remember to use code SHR to save up to 60% off of everything at their website. If there is one mineral you should be worried about not getting enough of, it's magnesium. Magnesium is the body's master mineral, powering over 300 critical reactions, including detoxification, fat metabolism, energy, and even digestion is influenced by the presence of magnesium. That's why I'm so excited to tell you about a new magnesium product I've been taking now called Magnesium Breakthrough. It's the ultimate magnesium supplement, easily the best I've ever seen or experienced. With all 7 forms of magnesium, I was able to arrange an amazing deal for my audience, and I guarantee it's the best deal available on this product. Seriously, with volume discounts combined with our custom 10% coupon code SHR10, you can save up to 40% off select packages of Magnesium Breakthrough. And I promise that this deal is only available on this specific website, magbreakthrough.com/SHR. You won't find that deal on Amazon or even on the company's own website. Go to magbreakthrough.com/SHR and use code SHR10 to save up to 40% off select packages of Magnesium Breakthrough.
You're listening to the Superhuman Channel. We're ripped and we're ready.
Welcome back. So there is absolutely evidence that you can train for size. People like Doug Brignoli, Brad Schoenfeld, and I literally have finally gotten this message after 20 plus years of training. Volume is king when it comes to making your muscles bigger. The idea that we have this, arbitrary, do 3 sets of 10 or even 5 sets of 5. I've always thought to myself, that doesn't make any sense to me. It really doesn't. And in fact, this became very evident to me about 8 or 9 years ago. I've never had big biceps because as a power lifter kind of guy, I didn't do any curls. My biceps got activated with heavy pulling movements and stuff like that. And so I really never had an arm day in my program. I never went and just trained triceps and biceps. That was never me. And to this day, I really don't yet. But what I learned was I went to the gym and did a 6-hour arm routine. And you're laughing because you've probably heard of some of these insane grow your arms in one day protocols. But I decided I'm going to give it a try. And I did. And
what did you think?
I put an inch on my arms in one day and it never went away. Never went away. And now I brought intra-workout food with me. I had cornstarch as a carbohydrate, and I had whey protein. I had a shaker bottle. I trained for 45 minutes. I rested for 15. I drank my drink. I went back and trained for 45 minutes. I did redundant movements over and over again, curling movements, tricep kickback, all these different movements over and over and over again for 6 hours. Wow. And we did a before and after. We taped my arms, and I put a solid inch on both arms. And to this day, they've never gotten any small. They've kept that. And I started thinking about it. When I was a kid, I used to buy these balloons that you can make balloon animals out of, after you inflated them. And they were skinny, skinny, skinny balloons. And when I would blow them up, I'd actually get pains in my jaw from the back pressure in my trying to blow that balloon up. But if the air came out, the second time it was a lot easier to blow up. And I thought, stretching the fascia is a critically important factor in making muscles bigger. It's kind of like if you live in a house and it's 600 square feet and you get a lot of furniture, you have one option or two options. You have two options. You move out to a bigger flat, or you tear some walls down and give yourself some room. And that's how I equated the volume. And so I have added muscle to my old ass in the past couple of years because I stopped doing reps and sets and I started training for time. The first movement I do for 20 minutes. And I gradually increase weight and I increase reps, but I don't have a prescription. It's like, the first set I'm going to do for 16 reps. I just do it to failure every single set. Then I move to another movement. I do that for 15 minutes. I do another movement for 15 minutes. Then I do another movement for 10 minutes. And my body is growing. And I all I can say is it's all about volume. The more volume you do, and there's a term that I've come to use called occupational hypertrophy. If you're at the beach and you look at guys who drive automatic transmission cars, their right calf is bigger than their left because they brake, gas, brake, gas, brake. If they're driving a stick car, they may have a more balanced look because they're hitting that clutch. I learned this when I was a kid. I worked on the racetrack. All the farriers, the blacksmiths, they had right arms that looked like Popeye's forearm. And I'm swinging that hammer 10,000 times a day. Their left forearm was normal. And so I started to get it. I started to think, it's all about volume. If you do something more, the muscle will respond. Okay, critique my opinion.
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of scientific evidence for that. And that's why, Brad Schoenfeld and others have kind of pushed that argument from a scientific perspective. That there is good evidence that time under tension is crucial. That's one of the kind of jargon terms for the same thing. Time under tension. How much time can you accumulate under tension? Particularly time under tension at pretty high forces is important, but time under tension. And the more time under tension, the bigger hypertrophy, the bigger growth response you will get. There's a lot of good evidence for that. Now, quite where that stops and all of the nuance in there in terms of sets and reps and manipulations and what's the ideal frequency of training and things. You do once a day, twice a day, 3 times a week, 5 times a week. A lot of those things are still a little bit opaque, but certainly this idea that time under tension is important it appears to be key. I completely agree.
And, I look at work. My father was a laborer. My grandfather was a brick mason. They were all laborers. They went to work 8-10 hours. They handled heavy stuff. and they did it. And they didn't approach work like we do a workout, right? They didn't go, how can I make this the hardest possible to do and burn myself out an hour? They go, no, I'm going to be here for 8-10 hours building walls. I got to kind of, measure myself. They were all big, strong guys when they were working. My father carried a refrigerator up the stairs on his back, 4 flights with nothing but a belt around it to keep it. Now, don't forget, refrigerators in the 60s were lighter. Don't get me wrong. But I mean, they were all big, strong men, and they worked and they labored, and my father had big arms, big shoulders, thick back, big chest, never lifted weights. So I started thinking to myself, maybe I need to look at this more like work. And that's why I started doing the time instead of sets and reps, and say, okay, I'm going to work out for an hour and a half, and I'm going to compartmentalize the movements by different time frames. Now we have a listener who's a viewer, being Lahori Fitness. He says, what about 10 sets? I guess there's a new study about 10 sets being effective. I'm willing to bet if there is, it's true over 3 or 5 sets. And whoever does the 20 set study is going to outperform the 10 set study. It's all about volume, isn't it?
Yeah, I think volume is important, but there probably are limits, and that may well vary between people too, because if you do too much, the extra exposure, there is a greater risk of injury and tendinopathy and all sorts of other issues. So, things do need to be progressed carefully. I think that is very important. But I think volume is a pretty key rule. And I think, as you've described, when you look at in the kind of strength training community and strength athletes, they've kind of arrived at a practice that works, and that practice is to do a lot of volume,
right?
For developing strength or building muscle. Both largely are responsive to volume.
The Romanian powerlifter, Olympic athletes back in the day were revered for their strength. And what happened was there was a guy from the United States who went over there and trained with them and got close to their coaches, Leo Costa. He wrote a book about it called Big Beyond Belief that was published originally back in the 70s, I think. And so there was this illusion that all they did was singles and doubles. Right? And it was true. That is all they did. They just did singles and doubles, but they did 65 sets a day. So they would go into the gym and they'd warm up obviously first, and then they'd do a couple doubles and they'd go back to their room and they'd eat. Yeah. And then a half hour later, they'd come back to the gym. And so that people were going, I saw this guy train. He walks into the gym. He's in the gym 20 minutes and he's gone. How could he be so strong? Because he walked into the gym 15 times that day and did it, for 20 minutes. And so again, it comes back to, volume. I really think the Wade Johnson, who was a world-class powerlifter, a good friend of mine, he says, if you want to get good at the squat, you got to squat a lot. If you want to get good at the bench press, spending time under the bar is key. And that really, in simplest terms, is volume. Volume.
Yeah. I absolutely agree. I think volume is very important. But one of the things we haven't really touched on is the variability between people. And you see this big variability, both in the gains in strength and the gains in muscle size with training. And that's a really interesting phenomena, such that, we've done studies where the people who gain the most in strength, they improve by 6 times, 7 times people who gain the least. Some people go up a few percent, maybe 5%. Other people go up 35%.
Right.
And that's amazing. And you see similar when you look at the muscle growth as well. You see people who get substantial hypertrophy, and other people barely change. And that's a really interesting topic, because if we could understand that, unpick that, then that would be really useful to try to amplify the training response.
But I don't think you're going to be able. So, in my humble opinion, and all I do is talk on this show. I have no formal education in this area, so I defer to you. But from an evolutionary perspective, we have working class dogs, right? Hounds, huskies. These dogs, through specific breeding techniques, we created an artificial selection pressure to bring this particular breed to where it is, where these dogs excel in working and doing what they do. Just same way we breed little tiny dogs that, you know, are good to put in your pocket and novelty and go, oh, look, I have a little dog. So the same is true of humans, except it wasn't deliberate like it is dogs. But women, millions of years ago, nobody had PhDs. You had to be a good hunter and you had to be able to protect. And that required strength and speed and agility and awareness. And women had babies with those men. And those men fathered babies who were good. Like I said before, I come from a long line of brick masons. I never realized how strong I was until I started training. I was like, oh my God, I'm doing things that nobody else can do. And I've only been training for a year now. And so I joke. I say I am a working class human. I'm a working grade human. I was selected for my strength, and the women in my lineage chose strong men because that's where the value was. And I think Ronnie Coleman has to be a double myostatin knockout human being. He has to be, because the guy put on muscle like just looking at the weight, and he was so strong.
Yeah. Well, some people do, and there's almost certainly a genetic basis to that. What's interesting though is the science so far hasn't been able to find what that genetic basis is. You know, there's been interest in a lot of different candidate genes that might influence the gains in strength with training, or the gains in muscle mass with training. And that has huge implications, because if we can understand what's regulating muscle size and muscle strength for frailty, for rehabilitation, for musculoskeletal diseases such as osteoarthritis or Parkinson's, many diseases where the weakness is an issue. If we can understand the genetic basis, potentially we can manipulate it and we can start to intervene in all of these cases. But so far, the science hasn't really been able to convincingly demonstrate that any particular candidate genes or genetic variants between all of us actually influence strength gain and muscle growth.
Yeah, I know that's why Se-Jin Lee was so disappointed, because he thought when he discovered myostatin that inhibiting it would help people with neuromuscular diseases like Parkinson's, and wasting diseases like cerebral palsy and stuff like that. But he was very disappointed because it never panned out.
Yeah, that's right. But certainly, you know, the endocrine hormones, testosterone being obviously the number one candidate, that's got to be important in some of these responses and this variability in the responses, you would think. But again, even the evidence there isn't nearly as convincing as you might think it is. Whilst there's no doubt that if you give people what you might call supraphysiological testosterone, so above and beyond what they already have, then that's effective for improving muscle size and muscle strength. And there's some really great studies on that in the literature. But how much difference does it make, the variability that there is between people and between all of us?
Right.
Does that really matter? Well, it's hard to imagine it doesn't. I mean, you only have to see the differences on average between males and females. That is mainly driven by testosterone.
Humans are so complex. I have discovered that men develop something called iron overload because testosterone increases the absorption of iron, especially hemi-iron from meat. And I call iron now metabolic debris. It gets into every cell. It causes all sorts of problems. And it could be the reason why men get weaker as they get older. I'm on high dose of testosterone. I actually just came down. I did blood work last month, and I'm honest with my audience. I was doing 500 milligrams a week, and my total testosterone was 4,700 nanograms.
Wow.
So now I moved down to 200 milligrams a week in hopes of just getting down to like maybe 12 to 1,500 nanograms, where it's really healthy for me at my age. But the reality is that my strength has changed, and it's not where it was 7-8 years ago. And my iron levels are so, in fact, tomorrow I'm scheduled for a therapeutic phlebotomy. I actually ordered on Amazon a ferritin and hemoglobin testing kit. And I'm going to go once a month or twice a month and donate blood until I get my ferritin levels down. And then I want to see what happens to my body over the next year. But again, I illustrate this because we are always looking for the one thing or the five, even the five things is ridiculous because we are so complex and so interwoven with so many different biological systems that we're never going to find the one thing that's going to save people's muscle from disappearing as they age. I mean, obviously high protein does. We just did that show that elderly people do benefit from high protein as much as the young people. They tend not to eat it as much because they end up with digestive issues and their teeth aren't the same. So again, it's so many different things. It just is. It really is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I mean, we've been focusing on, muscle size and muscle growth for strength, but it is multifactorial. I mean, that is, as I said at the beginning, that is the most important single factor, but it is multifactorial. There are many factors and they have an influence. And we've hardly talked about the neural aspects and the nervous system aspects of strength, and they're pretty important too.
Well, let's do that when we come back from the break. We're going to take a break, and we'll talk about the neural aspect of strength and muscle size as well, because let's face it, there's a lot of people who've had nerve damage, and the loss of innervation into a muscle makes it shrink, not just weaker. So we'll talk about that, and then we'll get to everybody else's questions that's watching. Sit tight. We'll be right back. Every day, there's a new wellness trend. Eat that, do this, avoid those. How do you know where to start or who to trust? Inside Tracker helps you cut through the noise by analyzing your blood, your DNA, your lifestyle, and your fitness tracker to provide you with a science-backed trackable action plan on how to live, age, and perform better. Personalized one-size-fits-one recommendations to help you optimize you. For a limited time, Inside Tracker is offering Superhuman Radio listeners 25% off the entire store. Go to shrnetwork.biz/inside tracker, INSIDETRACKER, to save 25% off. Change begins on the inside. Is there something interfering with your happiness or ability to achieve your goals? BetterHelp can help. They will assess your needs and match you with a licensed therapist. This is not a self-help or crisis line. It's professional counseling done securely online. They have a broad range of experts and are available worldwide without having to wait in an uncomfortable waiting room. Get the help you need and start living a happier life today. Go to shrnetwork.biz/betterhelp. That's better, HELP, and receive 10% off your first month of counseling when you use the code SHR. Being superhuman means being conscientious about the choices we make. White Oak Pastures is superhuman when it comes to raising livestock. They're committed to animal welfare, land regeneration, and rural revival. They responsibly manage the entire process from the pasture to your doorstep. High-quality, pasture-raised, great-tasting meat from a farm you can trust. Full nose-to-tail selections. They even have options for your pet. Go to shrnetwork.biz/whiteoak and use the code SUPERHUMAN to save 10% off your entire first order. Hypertrophy. Remember those rectangular toaster pastries you used to love when you were a kid? Well, Legendary Foods has just made them better. The new cake-style tasty pastry is like nothing you've ever had before. With 20 grams of high-quality protein and less than 1 gram of sugar, you'll feel like you're cheating, but you're not. Go to shrnetwork.biz/legendary and use the code SHR10 to save 10% off your purchase of tasty pastries. Now available in cookies and cream, red velvet cake, birthday cake, blueberry, strawberry, brown sugar cinnamon, and hot fudge sundae. Go to shrnetwork.biz/legendary and use code SHR10 today. Hey, this is Carl Lenore. Superhuman Radio is the longest running health, fitness, and anti-aging podcast in the world, going into our 16th year of continuous production. If you have a product that you think would appeal to the superhuman nation, we can get you on the air quickly and inexpensively to help promote your brand. Join the ranks of some of the largest and most successful companies in the world who know how great it is to be affiliated with Superhuman Radio. Contact Dan Kapitsky today. That's DAN.KOPITZKE at superhumanradio.net to learn more.
This is the Superhuman Channel, doing reps with the weight of the world.
Welcome back. We're talking with Professor Jonathan Folland. We're talking about the influence of muscle size on muscle strength. And as we talked about earlier, the number one correlate between muscle strength is size, and that's pretty undeniable. But muscle nerve activation is important too. So why don't you talk about that? You want to talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really important. And there's loads of evidence that there is an improvement in neural activation of the muscle, particularly in the early weeks of a training program. How long that goes on for is more controversial. That's less well demonstrated. But there's no doubt that in the first weeks of a training program, there's quite a lot of learning, improvements in coordination, and improvements in the delivery of neural signal, action potentials or electrical impulses to the muscle, particularly the firing frequency, the frequency at which those action potentials are delivered to the muscle increases. And this almost certainly contributes to the improvement in strength in the first weeks of training. As I say, it's more controversial whether that continues to improve. Whereas with muscle growth, we know that muscle growth just goes on and on and on, at least for months,
right,
and almost certainly for years. With the neural adaptation, there's an improvement, and then does it plateau? Does it gradually increase a bit more? It's hard to say. Evidence on that is less clear, certainly for kind of what you would call regular maximum strength tasks. But for more complex tasks, like sprint activity, where you've got to activate the muscles, switch them on and switch them off again very quickly, which is going more into a skilled task, you could say. In those more complex situations, there may well be more prolonged learning and coordination adaptations, essentially changes within the nervous system and the way in which all of the muscles together are used and activated. And those gains may well go on for much longer with practice of that particular skill, say sprint running is a classic example.
So I read, I can't remember which book I read. I read a book and there was a study in it that made the argument that for instance, let's say you grab two 50-pound dumbbells, you get your arms into a contracted curl position and you hold it there. You're doing a contracted static. When the muscles start to undulate, where you're starting to shake. You start to shake.
Yeah.
That's a function of certain muscle fibers failing and another muscle fiber turning on to do its job, and that over time would stimulate greater inroads of neuromuscular activation. Is there any evidence of that?
I'm not sure that there is. I've certainly come across this idea of kind of oscillating training that might be useful, but I'm not sure there's any real evidence for that at the moment. I mean, you're completely right about the underpinning physiology, and that essentially the motor units or the groups of muscle fibers are getting tired and they're dropping out and others are coming in their place. And so instead of having a smooth, steady contraction, you have this kind of bouncing around contraction as that's going on. Right. But does that actually lead to benefit in terms of greater gains in neural activation? I'm not sure that we know that. I'm not aware of anything like that.
Now, if hyperplasia is a very great phenomenon, it's actually the activation of new satellite cells into muscle fibers, right?
Yeah.
And that increases density of the muscle, but it also increases the ability of the muscle to get bigger and stronger. Which, if you were experiencing hyperplasia, isn't it fair to say that part of the deployment of that new muscle fiber is, a nerve going to it and controlling it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the muscle can do nothing without neural activation. It has to be controlled. And in fact, it won't be there without neural activation because the muscle those fibers will waste. So those two things tend to change very much in parallel. The amount of muscle and and the nerve supply to the muscle, that they have to, because the muscle fibers that don't have an active nerve supply simply won't be there. They will just waste away without receiving some stimulus from the nervous system.
Is there any style of training or any evidence on how we can stimulate hyperplasia?
I don't think so. I mean, nothing that I'm aware of. I mean, the phenomena of hyperplasia, strictly speaking, is the increase in the number of fibers, whereas hypertrophy is a growth of the existing fibers.
Right.
Hyperplasia is more fibers. Now, the evidence for hyperplasia in response to resistance training is fairly limited, actually. I believe in the long term, it's almost certainly is an important phenomena, but it's not an easy thing to demonstrate, because you've got to show that there's an increase in the number of fibers. How are you going to do that?
You got to do biopsies. You got to do
but even that won't really tell you the number of fibers in the muscle. To really know the number of fibers in the muscle, the only thing you can really do to accurately get that is to surgically remove the muscle and count them. Clearly, in humans, that is impossible. Even in animals, that is extremely laborious, even for a small muscle, because small muscles may have tens of thousands of muscle fibers. Counting them all, you want to spend your life counting muscle fibers? I don't know.
No.
So hyperplasia is a very difficult phenomenon to research, but there is some evidence that suggests a little along the lines you were talking about with kind of occupational training and adaptations to occupation. There are suggestions that over years and decades that muscles that are loaded will respond and develop more fibers. From some autopsy studies of cadavers, where you can actually take the muscles and begin to count the numbers of muscle fibers.
And dye them. You have to use dye to even do that.
Yeah, to be able to see what's going on. Absolutely. Because you can't ordinarily do that in a healthy, certainly healthy people, in people, period. So it's a really challenging topic, hyperplasia.
So we have some comments and questions. We're going to work through them really quick here. He says, Dean Paulson says, I'm nowhere near my max strength of 20 years ago, but I have maintained lean body mass almost to challenge or loss of almost no change in loss of muscle or fat. I'm working on 15 to 20 rep ranges. I can't go heavy anymore. I'm too beat up. I'm probably 30% off top and max strength of my 30s. This is a good question. So Robert Thompson wants to know the role of TRT, testosterone replacement therapy, and then also protein intake, 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. And that really matters. Leucine content matters more. I mean, you can eat collagen protein and it doesn't have much leucine in it. So, but what do you think? I mean, obviously these guys like me on testosterone and eating high protein, we should be able to maintain muscle longer.
Yeah, it should definitely help compared to the kind of what you might call the normal situation without those things. You would absolutely expect it would help, especially as it accumulates over time. Yeah.
And Robert, you always ask questions about BCAAs, and you've heard on this show numerous times that BCAAs are a waste of money. If you're going to take any free-form amino acids, take the essential amino acids. BCAAs may turn on the building machinery, but there is no bricks and mortar to build. That's akin to calling the workers in, but not giving them bricks and mortar to build a wall. They're wasting their time. Switch to EAAs. You always ask about BCAAs. Switch to EAAs. Trust me, you'll get the results that you're looking for. Dean Paulson also says I guess he's saying the Super Bulls. Myostatin. The Belgian Blues and the Piedmontese Bulls are all myostatin null. There's myostatin null whippets now that can't race. They have myostatin null racing dogs that they don't have the ability to run. That just goes to show you that that's a case where bigger muscles don't work. Hypertrophy for seniors over 65, longevity and health. What are reasonable expectations? Compound exercises versus isolation. I seem to get gains within 6 sets 10 reps in deadlifts, 2-minute breaks from the Huberman lab. Huberman is all over the place. I hear his name all the time. What do you think? Should we expect different responses from our bodies if we're not on hormone replacement therapy over 65?
Yeah, probably. I mean, I would expect the adaptation to be bigger with the hormone replacement therapy, because the testosterone is so important for the muscle response to training. So yeah, I would definitely expect that. I think for most, generally for aging, the compound exercises for me would be better. That you would tend to think of them as being more functional.
Yes.
Better.
They increase mobility. You know what I mean?
Yeah, mobility, locomotion, the way you move in general. So you would expect them to be more beneficial, but it does depend on what you're trying to do and what you're trying to achieve. If you're training for something very specific in terms of performance, then more isolated single joint exercises may be a useful adjunct for you.
Yeah. Dean Paulson is concurring. 100% volume is the prime driver for hypertrophy. I think the pump is a big contributor too. The pump is a big contributor because of what I said before. It helps to stretch that fascia and make more room in the muscle. But at the same time, the pump actually harms contractile force and strength. So it's a delicate balance there, I think. Joel Ja. Manual labor and lifting and moving irregular shapes, objects makes you really strong in a way squats and deadlifts just don't. You're right. And that this whole functional strength discussion is lost if all you're doing is things in the gym with with dumbbells and barbells. The whole idea of functional strength, go out and pick up a stone and walk with it. There's a starter. What do you think?
Yeah. And I'm a big believer in specificity. The training adaptations are specific to what you do. And if you do very specific lifts and you do them in a very concentrated way all the time, you will get very good at those lifts. But at some other exercises, you probably won't be so good because the transfer won't be there unless you do a more rounded program and more functional type exercises.
Right. Let's see here. Craig Hollander says it's a bell-shaped curve. He's agreeing with you. Overtraining can do more than muscle, tendon, ligaments, and joint, more damage, basically.
Yeah.
Saying it. He agrees with you.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Wait. Let me see. I have some other good questions here. Aiden Ray. Time under tension. Any thoughts on approaching time under tension via slower performance? There's a lot of people who do super slow stuff.
Yeah, that's right.
Josh Trentin has built an amazing physique. Arthur Jones, Mike Mentzer, high intensity, blah, 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 versus to increase volume. What do you think about slow movements?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely fine. I think it tends not to be so functional though. Most functional movements rely a bit more on power and being able to move reasonably quickly. And so I think for function, so a quicker movement, a higher movement velocity is useful. Excuse me.
Craig Hollander agrees that iron overload and high polyunsaturated fatty acids do the most damage to the immune system and causes lipofusion. Let's see. Robert Thompson knows my ferritin levels are almost 600 right now, and I feel horrible. When my iron, keep in mind, ferritin is not a good indicator of iron. Ferritin is a protein produced by the body in the liver, actually, to chaperone iron into cells. And one molecule of ferritin can hold anywhere from 1 to 60,000 molecules of iron. So having high ferritin isn't a good indicator. But when you have high ferritin and then you have high TIBC, which is, iron binding capacity, total iron, that's the indicator of how much iron is in your body. If you take vitamin C, 1,000 milligrams a day, and don't eat any iron in your diet, your ferritin levels will go up anyway. And now we're learning that ferritin may be a better indicator of total body inflammation than iron. But iron contributes a great deal to total body inflammation. It's basically rust inside your cells. It really is. Time under tension, we got that one. The guys mentioning age injury as inhibitors to training heavy may want to look into Be Strong BFR bands. Yes, I have them. I love them. You can train light and your muscles grow. So I started putting the BFR bands on my legs in anticipation I'm going to train my legs soon. And I just do cardio with them. And my legs blow up and stay blown up for the rest of the day after doing cardio in the morning with them. So there's something to it, no doubt about it. So last question. What would you like both lay people and clinicians to take away from your recent paper?
In the medium to long term, to gain in strength, you have to get some gains in muscle growth. And that will be advantageous to gaining strength and power, no doubt about it. Trying to design a program that improves muscle growth, leads to muscle growth, will help to contribute to improvements in strength and power.
Yeah. I finally figured this out after all these years myself. It's why I started training and focusing on volume. And I thought, I don't want to count reps and sets. I don't even count. I don't know how many sets. I estimate that in a 20-minute session of a given movement, I do between 12 and 16 sets, but I don't care. All I know is my muscles are growing. They're responding. And so I love it. I think this is great work, Professor Folland, and I'm glad that you came on the show to talk about it, because I think that more people should focus on a bodybuilding type of a training protocol where you are focusing on muscle growth, because bodybuilders are strong. Ronnie Coleman was front squatting 780 pounds for reps weeks out from the Olympia, completely carb depleted. I mean, I don't care who you are. You got to respect that. You got to respect that.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here today.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me on the show.
Take care. We're going to take one quick commercial break. Stay with me. We'll be right back. I need to share with you all a revolutionary new wearable technology called Hapbee. Hapbee allows you to enjoy the effects of caffeine, alcohol, nicotine, melatonin, and muscle relaxants without actually ingesting anything. Yes, really. They figured out the unique magnetic signature of each of these molecules and recorded them. Just put the Hapbee on, choose the signal you want, and it starts projecting the magnetic signature of that molecule that you choose, like coffee for feeling alert. Go to hapbee.com/SHR. That's HAPBEE.com/SHR to learn more and unlock an $80 discount exclusively for the Superhuman Radio listeners. Knoll Creek Hemp Company's Delta 8 soft chews are the premier Delta 8 product on the market today. Knoll Creek's Delta 8 is produced from high-quality hemp-derived CBD oil, and soft chews are manufactured using proprietary nano-emulsification technique that ensures the Delta 8 soft chew will timely deliver the desired effects cleanly and consistently from piece to piece. In a space where at least 70% of the products fail to meet label claims and where most users of conventional hemp products are left disappointed, Knoll Creek's Delta 8 soft chews are a product you can trust. Visit shrnetwork.biz/Delta8. That's DELTA and the number 8, and use the code SHR20 to get 20% off your first order today. Hypertrophy. I would easily say that I am the hugest proponent you will ever meet to doing anything that will improve the quality of my sleep. And that's because sleep is linked to just about every metabolic disorder we see in our population today. One of the easiest things you can do to improve the quality of your sleep is to get a pillow that can be shaped into the exact form factor that allows you to get your best night's sleep. And that is MyPillow. I've been sleeping with MyPillow for a few years now, and I can tell you that when I have to travel and stay in hotels, I don't get a good night's sleep because I don't have MyPillow with me. Right now, you can save up to 60% off of everything offered to improve the quality of your sleep at shrnetwork.biz/mypillow when you use the code SHR. Or you can call toll-free 800 889-4938. And remember to use code SHR to save up to 60% off of everything at their website. I want to introduce you to Tau Patch, a heavily researched patented wearable device that provides immediate and long-lasting health benefits. Tau Patch's nanocrystals convert your body heat into light of specific therapeutic frequencies that optimize your central nervous system. The health benefits of Tau Patch include relief from chronic pain, better sleep, increased focus, reduced stress, improved athletic performance, and more. Discover what it can do for you by visiting shrnetwork.biz/Tau Patch. That's TAOPATCH. Use code SHR for your superhuman discount today. Redcon One's new BAR bar is the ultimate soft-baked protein-packed snack bar, powered by peanut butter. Perfect for while on the go to help curb hunger or sneaky sweet tooth cravings. With 20 grams of protein, use as a meal replacement bar or when you're in need of a high-protein snack. Eat a Redcon One bar as a midday snack or for fuel before an intense training session. Go to shrnetwork.biz/Redcon One and use the code SHR25 and save 25% off these delicious bars today.
This is the Superhuman Channel, where brawn and brains finally meet.
Well, I'm hoping that Dmitri Leonov can hear me because he's in our green room, but I don't see his camera. Dmitri, can you open up your camera, please? There we go. Excellent.
How are you?
Great. We made it. Thank you.
Awesome.
Welcome to the show, first of all. And we're here to talk about an exciting new technology that my audience can take advantage of. I'm actually wearing mine. Let me see if I can show it to you. It's taped to my upper chest here. You can't really see it that well with this camera. But this product is the first, in my humble opinion, nanotechnology available to humans to use for changing the way their brain and their body works. How did you start out? I mean, you got a lot of science to talk about. There's lots of research on this. This is not, foo-foo stuff. There's lots of clinical evidence that this works. Where did you first discover this idea that you could harness photons created from body heat and send them back into the body? Where did that come from?
The idea itself is actually not that new in a sense. So essentially what we're doing is we're combining light therapy with acupuncture. And light therapy is a very well-researched form of medicine. There's a ton of studies done. Acupuncture is actually the most researched form of medicine on PubMed, which is the database of studies. Yeah. But I didn't invent the product. It was invented by a very, very, very smart gentleman called Fabio Fontana in Italy 8 years ago. And the story is that he got into a really bad accident. Nothing helped him. No therapy could help. And the only thing that did help him was light therapy.
But back then, light therapy meant what? Was he getting like LED lights or heat lamps or laying in the sun, or what was he doing?
Sure, it's basically it's called low-level laser therapy. Is another name for it. So it's like you're holding a laser and you're putting it on certain points in your body, like joints where the injury is.
Now, do you happen to know what wavelength 880, 900 nanometer? Was he using red light? What kind of light was he using?
He was using red light, but what's really interesting is there are different studies on different color, wavelength of light affecting different systems. And so what we did is we essentially developed this nanomaterial, which is capable of, it's kind of acting like a mirror. So it's taking your own energy, right, and reflecting it back to you. But it's reflecting it. There's also kind of a prism, so it refracts the light from infrared frequencies to pretty wide spectrum. And
I can see that. So what you're doing is you're using prism technology or Fresnel technology in a sense. I think that's what they used to, when they made the first flat prisms, they were called Fresnel or Fresnel. I don't think the S is I think the S is silent. So what you're doing is you're using that to recombine the light technically and then send it back into the body.
Yeah, exactly. It's like we're taking your own energy and just like showing it back to you, right? There's no really external energy of any sort. There's no battery. It's just your own energy.
Now, obviously, the body's energy is visible when you use certain types of thermal cameras. It's very easy to see the body's energy. But humans, we can't see those wavelengths. Even when they're emanating from the sun, they're not the visible wavelength. They're not the visible spectrum. So this invisible spectrum that is being harnessed and then redirected back into the body by the tau patch. Do you know what wavelengths those are?
Yeah, it ranges from actually from infrared to ultraviolet. So it's and we have a couple of different products, and so the major difference between them is the number of wavelengths that it covers.
Okay, so I'm wearing START, and by the way, I'm astonished. This will last me 2.5 years, right?
Yeah.
This one pack. Mm-hmm. So this is astonishing. This is not like you buy it every month thing, like most people want to sell you. But then the other one says emotion, and I didn't want to take that one yet because wasn't sure that I wanted to change my emotions. Talk about the difference in what these two different patches deliver to the person and experience.
Yeah, you don't want to start crying, right? When you
I didn't know, like I didn't want to go, oh, Dmitri, why were you late? I'll start having PMS or something, you know.
Well, so what we found is the emotion is more green. So there's a color of the general wavelength that is more aimed at emotional well-being, emotional issues, I guess. Mm-hmm. Also, we found that it's really good. We have this one protocol called the pyramid protocol, where you place them on a face mask and you put it on top of your head. And that general protocol is great for any kind of mobility or neurological disorders. But what we found is with emotion, especially, it's very helpful for ADD and ADHD.
So what do you see in children with ADHD when and where do they put it? They have to put it on their head, or can they put it on their sternum or the back of their neck?
So for ADD, we haven't, but I have to preface everything by saying, so we haven't done a proper study on this. We have 12 studies. We have studies on multiple sclerosis, pain, mobility. We actually had 5 Olympic athletes in the Olympic Games this year. So for sports, it's amazing. It just the first. Let me not answer directly your question, but I'll get to it in a second.
Yeah.
The number one system that gets affected, especially with the START that you're wearing, is your proprioception system. So it's your proprioception is basically if you close your eyes and like extend your arm forward or to the side, the reason you know
where they are, right?
That's proprioception. But it's basically your balance, mobility, range of motion, and so on. And so we've done a lot of studies on posture, balance, again, mobility, movement. We've done year-long placebo-controlled studies on different things. So with emotion, we haven't done as much. And so we've seen anecdotally that it does amazing things for ADD, but we don't have proper studies. So I don't want to.
No, that's fine. I get it. And so let's talk about this one study that Natalie sent me that I read, which assessed people's stability in their kind of side-to-side movement when they stood still with their eyes open and with their eyes closed. And obviously, when they close their eyes, that's when they start to lose proprioception. They start moving. Talk about that study, what you did and what you learned.
The thing that we, by the way, and none of the effects that we noticed is what we designed the product for. Pretty much all of it was kind of a happy accident.
Right.
Initially, it was designed to treat muscle contractures. So it's a very, very specific use case. And then
unintended muscle contractures or intended muscle contractures?
Unintended. Yeah. So and pain and that kind of a thing. And then one day, one of the doctors who was working with it decided to put it on a multiple sclerosis patient, just to see what happens.
Yeah, let's see what happens, right?
Yeah, and within 45 minutes, the person was in a wheelchair, and they literally got up from the wheelchair and did.
So the effects are that spontaneous and acute. That's amazing to me.
It depends. It depends on the case. We have a lot of people who put it on, and well, let me rephrase that. The effects are immediate and measurable, and so we have equipment in our lab. It's called the stabilometry device, where you stand on it and it shows your balance. Just kind of, it measures the weight on each part of it.
I was going to say it measures the weight on each foot, probably. Yeah.
But also, like, not just each foot, but well, there's two. There's one kind of overall between the 2 feet, and there's one called baropodometry, which actually measures each millimeter of your foot and shows where the balance is, on each of your feet. And so within minutes, we can always measure a measurable improvement in your balance. And the balance is measured by how much your center of gravity moves over, I think it's like 72 seconds or something like that. Right. And there's always a noticeable, measurable improvement. The problem, not a problem, but the difference is some people feel it, some people don't. If people who are in tune with their body, people who do a lot of yoga, for example, they always feel it right away. They think, they notice, they get more energy, they feel more grounded, more centered, more balanced physically and emotionally. Other people who are not as in tune with their bodies don't feel immediate results, and this is why we always recommend that you record yourself on video doing some certain tests, like, for example, the tandem gait, where you put one foot in front of the other to measure your balance. You can also, for example, just stand against the wall and see how much your neck turns, so how far you can see with the corner of your eye.
Right.
And so the studies that we've done were around posture, around balance, because those are the things we can measure with our equipment. Subjective things are a little bit harder to measure. And so, for example, with our study on MS, and I'd say to this day, most of our customers have MS or Parkinson's or neurological disorders, because for them, it's so much more obvious. Their benefits are so much more in your face.
Now, do they, if you're trying to use the tau patch, because you do have some sort of neuromuscular issues, would you use, I guess you'd use the start, right? You'd use the start one, or you wouldn't use the emotion one, right?
You probably wouldn't use emotion. So we have three general use ones for overall well-being. So the start, the pro, which I think you also have somewhere. No,
I don't think so. I think I just got I got two. There were two in there: the start and the emotion.
I think somebody from your team must have taken the pro.
Okay, that doesn't surprise me.
We'll send more your way. So there are Start, Pro, and Platinum, and the difference between them is the size. So the more advanced ones are a little bit bigger, thicker. So there's more nanomaterial. So the light is brighter, and the material is different. So it covers different wavelengths. So Start is more on the infrared, all the way to, let's say, half of the spectrum. Pro covers the other, the full spectrum, and Platinum covers also the full spectrum, but more specific frequencies within that range. And so there's different layers of benefits. So, for example, the first thing that you would notice is your proprioception, right? So, and people with MS start walking and controlling their muscles like they couldn't for years.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's just,
do they put it on their sternum? Do they put it on their back? Where do they put it?
Great point. So there are 2 points that are a must for everyone. First one is on your sternum, right there, and then the other one is on your C7. So it's your lower neck. It's
right where the neck meets the shoulders, and it's that large lump. You have that. Everybody has that protruding a spine joint right there. Yes. So right beneath that.
Exactly.
Okay.
And those are the 2 points those points were discovered through a lot of trial and error. And so what we found is these are the points that work most for everyone. Now, one thing to keep in mind is for the first 7 years that we've developed this product, up until last year, the only way for you to buy it would be to go to a doctor that is prescribing it.
Really?
And it's only in Europe. So we have a network of, I think, like 2,000 doctors at this point in Europe. and you could not buy it, online. You have to go to a doctor, and the doctor would actually treat you like a doctor would. They would do an intake, they would place them, they would try different points, do the measurements, send you home with them. Then you come back a week later, they do more measurements, adjust it, and so what we found is it's a better experience because a doctor is more in tune.
Oh yeah, right, and he's going to place it right where it belongs, and it doesn't. Correct me if I'm wrong. It comes with a high quality tape. It comes with a transpore, which transpore and micropore are two tapes that 3M makes for the surgical industry. But it's transparent. That's why the micropore is like a paper. The transpore is clear. So I taped it on. Now, do I have to take that off when I shower? This is waterproof.
It's waterproof. Yeah, basically for 2.5 years you don't have to take them off. So there are four critical, I call them 4 pillars of towel patch. The first pillar is the placement, and so what we did is over the first 8 years we kind of figured out what works, what doesn't, and we condensed and simplified the protocols in a way that they work for most people. And so the 2 points and by the way, once you order them, we have videos and instructions. You don't have to worry about it now. So these 2 points are the most common points that work for most people, and you start with them. And we also recommend everybody who gets started that we set up a call with somebody on our support team, just to make sure you're getting it right. Everything is
clear. Yeah, because you want it to work. You want it to work.
Well, and more importantly, everybody wants it to work. And we have a 100% money back guarantee for 90 days. If it doesn't work for any reason, or if it works but you're just don't want it anymore, you're welcome to return it. We don't make you jump through any hoops.
Right.
But on right now, I think the return rate is about 5%. So 5% of the people end up not happy.
Non-respond, and you're going to have non-responders and everything. But it's nice that you let them send them back. Most companies, if you're a non-responder, they say, "Well, just put it in your cupboard and forget about it."
Well, yes, but the thing what we found is pretty much everybody who returns them are people who did not reach out to us and set up a call and kind of learn how it works, because it's not a magic pill. And I started going through the 4 pillars. So let me just really quickly address the others. So the first one is the placement. The second one is the hydration. And again, most of the people who it doesn't work for don't drink enough water. We have a formula. It's 30 milliliters per kilogram of weight, which for most people ends up being around 2 liters, 2.5 liters per day.
Not much.
Sorry?
That's not much water, but I get it, because that affects the transparency and the transparency of the skin if it's not hydrated.
That's actually, I haven't actually thought about that. That's a really good point. It's not so much about the hydration of the skin; it's about the hydration of your overall system, because water kind of acts like a oil. If you use the car analogy, right? It acts like a lubricant or oil for your engine. And what happens with towel patch is it makes your nervous system function more effectively, faster. It's like driving a car at 5 miles an hour versus 100. So it makes your car drive at 100 miles an hour. And so if you don't have enough oil in the engine, it's going to be much more noticeable when you're driving at a high speed.
Right.
That's really the main reason. Okay, so the third one is the sequencing. So we don't recommend that you wear them 24/7 right away. And this is for 2 reasons. The number one is that there's a detox that happens. And the detox is very well researched and measured with light therapy in general. But the basic difference between towel patch and general light therapy is that most light therapy, where you go to a doctor's office and they shine this light on certain parts of your body, it happens for like an hour a week, or if you're lucky, 2 hours a week, right? That's I don't know what percentage of the time that is. And so basically you're kind of like screaming at your nervous system for an hour, and then everything goes back to normal. And so the system doesn't get a chance to adjust or retrain. And so what we're doing, we're placing very weak, very faint light. So it glows in the dark, by the way, most of the time.
Really?
Wow. But you don't have to see it for it to work. And it's very subtle, but it's consistent. It's applied on specific points consistently 24/7. after the initial kind of ramp up period.
Right.
And so and that makes all the difference. So okay, so let me just address
take your time.
Yeah. So the detox part is really important, because what happens is when this light, and this is not just with tau patch, this is other, I think any other light therapy with an element of infrared in it, it detoxifies your mitochondria. So it takes nitric oxide, or I always forget the name.
NO2. Yeah,
it's NO.
Okay.
NO. But so the thing about it is, so I know it sits in your mitochondria, and it basically, it looks to your cells, it looks like oxygen, but it's a toxin, and so it basically takes up the space of oxygen, and it doesn't allow your mitochondria to process as much oxygen and release as much energy, or ATP, as it could. And so it pulls the toxins out of your mitochondria into your bloodstream. And so if you're wearing it, or when you're wearing it 24/7, it's constantly pulling the toxins into your bloodstream, and the toxins can't build up in your bloodstream, which then causes tension and not feeling great. And that's why we recommend for the first week that you wear it only 4 hours a day. So for 4 hours, you're pulling the toxins, and then giving the body the rest of the day to flush them out. Second week, you do 8 hours a day. Third week, 16 hours a day, and then you can do 24/7. Some people don't need that, but we recommend it just to be safe.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So you can leave it on in the shower. Can you wear two? Can I take two of the starts and put one on my sternum and one on my cervical spine?
Oh, Carl, you have to. You have to do those 2 points.
Oh, I thought it was either or.
No,
Okay,
no.
I only have one on then on my
Oh
sternum.
no, you should definitely put two.
See, and I would have said, "Oh, it doesn't work." Yeah. Okay,
Exactly.
I'll add that one in a little while. Okay.
Yeah, so it's important, because these are the two main, very important meridians. One is the governing meridian and the conception vessel. So the two kind of central governing meridians, and you need both for the balance. Otherwise, it's not balanced.
Okay. And like you said, these will last 2.5 years. What creates any kind of lifespan in this anyway? Does the plastic stop? Does it, what happens if that makes it not work longer than 2.5 years?
So actually, 2.5 years is 100% efficiency. After that, it starts to kind of get less efficient. So the rate at which the nanomaterial converts the heat into light gets less effective.
Okay.
So that's the only thing. So it's still going to work after 2.5 years, but it's not going to be as effective. So we don't. You can still keep using it after that, but it's not going to be as.
What about sleep? How does it? I mean, the literature says that it helps in sleep. Do you wear it to bed? Is that how it helps you to sleep, or what helps sleep?
So what helps with sleep is a overall rebalancing of your nervous system. So it doesn't. It's not a. Okay, let me back up. So the thing in general about, I'd say, holistic medicine that's different from allopathic, right? Western medicine, right? Is Western medicine it's all about fighting with stuff, right? So anti-inflammatory, anti-bacterial, everything's anti. So you're addressing the symptoms and you're fighting with your body. What we do, and I'd say what most holistic medicine does, it understands that your body is very capable of healing itself, but for most of us, it's out of balance. Our system is out of balance. For a number of factors, from genetic to living in the cities, right, with all sorts of pollution, from chemical to electromagnetic to and so what we're doing is we're helping your nervous system get back in balance. That's all the product does, right? It reminds your central nervous system how to communicate naturally with the rest of your body before all this stuff got in the way. Right? And so the reason, and by the way, we're still kind of learning what this thing can do, right? We didn't know what it can do for MS, and so we're doing a study on a heart rate variability, HRV, and so we've seen anecdotally, and like with me, for example, when I put it on and I measure my HRV, it's like 100%. It's absolutely perfect, and so and HRV is probably the best proxy for overall stability and well-being, right? And when your brain or when your nervous system is in that state of peace, balance, stability, everything else just starts to work, right? So,
Mhm.
and that's why you start sleeping better, because you have, your brain waves are more stable during the day. You're not as jumpy, and then you can properly rest at night.
Right. Interesting. I want to put this up real quick for people to see. Here we go. So if you want to try Tau Patch, what you do is you go to shrnetwork.biz/Tau Patch. It's TAOPATCH. And if you use the code SHR, you'll get this. Do they get? Which can they choose from when they get to the website? They can choose whichever Tau Patch they want. Is that how it works?
Yeah. And by the way, so just to be clear, it's taupatch.co, right? Not.
Oh no, we're using a We're using a tracking link.
Perfect.
We're using a tracking link just so we can see who actually goes there. Perfect. We don't see who, but we know how many people. shrnetwork.biz/Tau Patch, TAOPATCH, and use the code SHR. Or you can go to Tau Patch, TAOPATCH.co, and use the code SHR. Mm-hmm. So you can learn more about it by going there. Either one of those URLs will get you there, mm-hmm. and the code will indicate that you bought it through Superhuman Radio. What is the price? How is it priced? So you have the start, the platinum, the pro. How are they all priced?
Sure. So when you first, and to answer your last question, the way to choose is there are two ways. When you get to our homepage, there's a button at the top that says choose my Tau Patch or something, and it's going to ask you a couple of questions. You answer them, and it's going to recommend the right version for you. But basically, we recommend one of the two options. First one is Start, and Start is $250. And again, keep in mind, it works for 2.5 years, so it ends up being, I think, $8 a month. That's right. Mm-hmm. And as a money back guarantee, we have basically 24/7 support. So if you have any questions, we're always here to help. So you're never on your own. And we're happy to do live Zoom calls to show you how everything works and so on. Mm-hmm. Okay, and then the Pro, which is a more advanced product, it has more power, so more nanomaterial and different nanomaterials, so it emits a broader range of frequencies. The Pro is $599. Mm-hmm. So what we recommend, we're not going to be the company that tells you have to buy the most expensive product. So we recommend it's completely fine to start with Start. You can always upgrade to Pro. You can use them together, and we have a upgrade program for existing customers. So that's very straightforward. So if whatever your budget is in, so if $250, that's perfectly fine. If you have a higher budget, we also, by the way, we have a payment program for, I think, 6 weeks. It's just interest-free payments. Mm-hmm. So it's basically $250 and $599.
So talk a little bit more about some of the other studies you've done. So the studies that you've done with people with multiple sclerosis, you said they notice differences pretty quickly because they're sensitive to their instability. What other studies have you done besides balance and posture type studies?
I mean, we mainly focused on balance, posture, sports. We haven't done proper studies on pain, but we have just pain is hard to do objective studies on. Mm-hmm. But chronic pain is one of the main use cases for this thing. So it's not really it's not a proper study. Sports, we've done not a study per se, but we have measured how it improves the way people jump and run. So people jump further, run faster.
And that makes sense if it affects posture, stability, proprioception. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah, exactly. Well, actually, one of my favorite customers is he's a Guinness record holder for backwards running.
Really?
Yeah.
How far and how long did he run?
I forget exactly, but it's very impressive. It's it's very fast and far. And it makes also perfect sense because running backwards, it requires a lot of proprioception, right?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, this is interesting. So I'm wearing mine. I'll start giving updates. I'll get the other one put on the back of my neck. I'll need someone to do that for me later. And then Good.
You don't have to. You can actually, if you tilt your head forward, you can feel that.
Yeah, I know. I felt that, but I just want to make sure it's put right in the center. But you're right. I could feel right where I have to put it.
Yeah. If it's a little bit off, it should be centered. Yeah, better if it's centered. Sure.
And it has to be centered on the sternum too, I was told,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. Okay.
If it's a little higher or lower is fine because it's still in the same meridian. But yeah, it should be centered.
This is very interesting. So I'll play around with this. We'll have you back on the show to talk some more about it. And have you had positive feedback for sleep issues?
So we haven't focused on sleep specifically. We have had people report that they sleep better. I would say it's important to not to ease into, like when I mentioned you only wear it for 4 hours during the day. We had some people who wore it 24/7 right away, and they report actually sleeping worse in the beginning. And this is because for the detox effect, it does affect. It basically, what it does is it reduces your wake state delta waves. So delta is something you're supposed to be doing when you're in deep sleep.
Right.
And so, but a lot of us, especially when we're stressed, we have a lot of delta waves when we're awake, and that's not good. And so we've seen how it just wipes that fresh clean. There's very little delta, and it does kind of build up your beta. So when you are going to notice more energy, you are going to notice that you're more awake, more focused
when you're wearing it, and that makes sense. And if you don't want that effect to happen at night when you're sleeping.
When you're starting, like now, I sleep with it. I don't take it off.
Right.
But in the beginning, it's good to ease into it.
Okay. Dmitri, I want to thank you for being on the show. I want to thank you for being a sponsor. We'll be talking more and more about the product as we move forward. We'll have you back on the show.
Thank you so much, Carl.
Take care. And that's it for today, folks. We will be back tomorrow with more Superhuman Radio. Tomorrow is Tuesday, which means we'll have the Blueprint Power Hour. And if you're inclined, you can submit questions to onair@superhumanradio.net, the same email address that you can send the secret word. If you were listening today, I'll tell you what it was. If you didn't listen to the commercials today, the secret word was hypertrophy. Very fitting for our first interview. So there you go. There's a freebie. Write the word hypertrophy down in an email and send it to onair@superhumanradio.net, and make sure you include your address, and we'll send you a box of chock full of all sorts of legendary food products. So there you go. And we'll see you tomorrow with more Superhuman Radio. Thanks for being here today. Don't forget to share the show. I will see you.